chapter 6, with a stopping, calming, resting, healing. We it's kind of the prerequisites, I suppose we could call this chapter. And there's an anecdote at the beginning about, or a story about this horse, a man riding a horse, and that he didn't know where he was going. Ask the horse. Uh, and carrying that visualization through the whole chapter, I think it was actually a very effective one. That saying the horses are habit energy, and how we can't do anything about it. Or he says we are powerless, which is the same as that, but then gives us the steps that we can take, that we can actually do something about it. We don't have to sit on the horse of habit energy and allow it to pull us through our whole life, but we
Yeah.
can, using this stopping, calming, and resting, find healing and not spread that kind of chaotic and like starting a war with other people in our lives if we can accomplish this.
Yeah. I really did
Uh,
appreciate him taking the time to like explain the difference between looking deeply and stopping. Because I think he has a point of the frequency for people to emphasize that look deep inside yourself,
mhm.
and overlook the importance of just just being.
Yeah, the idea that sometimes if you just stop and calm and just let things happen, that sometimes everything kind of resolves itself. Or sometimes the wisdom will come to you because
Hmm.
you haven't searched for it. Maybe we should stop moving for a bit. And I actually just listened to the podcast about his view on this exact thing too. So if I maybe bring in something else, it wasn't in the book, I
I
guess.
mean, I think that's a great way to do it, though, of like incorporating other resources into this. That's good.
And it's from him still,
Yeah.
so I mean it's the same thing. But um, oh, and I should probably I have to mirror what I'm doing on both screens. I have my tablet in front of me with the book too.
Oh, so that was me during the places that scare you, because I did all my note taking in my physical book, and then
Mm-hmm.
and then had to like slowly figure out where that was in the PDF I was using.
Oh, I opened it in the wrong way. Oh well. We can't really highlight, I guess, on this version that I just opened, but
You
that's
should be
okay.
able to highlight. Or
It's the way I opened it because I did it in the browser
uh,
instead of doing it on the actual file for
if
some
you
reason.
yeah, if you open your file in like Internet Explorer, it has a surprisingly decent PDF interactive like thing going on.
Should I do that really quick?
It's up to you. I'm easy either way.
Well, I guess it's just us, so
It's
I'm
just us.
assuming everybody here today actually did read it.
I did read it. I didn't read
So,
it this morning. I like to read. Usually, I would reread it the morning of.
hmm
But I
I know,
didn't
me
do that.
too.
I did
Me
read
too.
the chapters though, and I quite enjoyed them. I'm always a fan of Thich Nhat Hanh, which I think explains why I'm such a big fan of Pema, since she was a student of his. Um, and so one of the things I have highlighted was back on the first, just that opening page was it was near the yeah, the bottom paragraph there. It says we struggle all the time, even during our sleep. And I thought that
Yes.
was a really great point, because I do absolutely. I'm one of those people who remembers most of my dreams. And so I absolutely see proof of my subconscious continuing to work through these things constantly. Like even last night, I had this dream that I could absolutely relate to what I must be working through in my day to day, and I was like, ah, I can't let these things go even when I'm asleep.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'm at war within myself, and it causes me issues.
Mm-hmm.
So,
But the good news is, you can change it.
can I?
Ben, you were saying something?
No, I basically said, yeah, that I also read the chapter, so I'm at least somewhat prepared.
Yeah, I know sometimes we have people who are just kind of following along, and I think the highlighting helps a lot more in that case. But since we all have read it, I think maybe it'll be fine if I just do this kind of thing. A couple things I had highlighted were just like here, mindfulness is the energy that allows us to recognize our habit energy and prevent it from dominating us, and that forgetfulness is the opposite, just driving home some of
I
the.
I also highlighted forgetfulness is the opposite, and also highlighted we drink a cup of tea, but we do not know we are drinking a cup of tea. And that one
Mm-hmm.
hits hard with me because I've been reading another book of Thich Nhat Hanh's in my spare time, which is How to Eat.
Mm-hmm.
As I once again let me talk about my issues with food. Uh, so once again, I'm working on how I approach the things I nourish my body with, which he really gets into. And I was like, these chapters are oddly relevant to things I'm doing in my life. And so, um, how often do I consume something without thought? And am I just shoving it in my face? And like he said, drinking a cup of tea, but not really knowing I'm drinking a cup of tea. And so that was a good reflection for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
Yeah,
do really like that as well.
as he says, forgetfulness is it's basically the opposite of mindfulness. So yeah, instead of being in the moment, being aware what you're doing, you are doing something else in your head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a, although very simple, pretty essential bit of this chapter, I think. And also the distinction between, sometimes not paying attention to the things you're doing and kind of automating it can be seen as, being calm, and that's not, but it's not the same, is it? It
Yeah.
is not the same. And actually, moving into calming, I really liked this bit about, like, we hold our anger in our two arms like a mother holding her crying baby. And then he's talked about that a lot throughout the chapter as well, and what is causing our baby's discomfort, what's causing our baby to cry, and then
Mhm.
later on in the chapter mentioning that again. But I thought this was a one, the visualization of that for somebody who's in that moment can help people to be a little bit kinder for themselves as well. But it's a way to look at emotion as outside the self. Like, the emotion is something that you have, but it isn't you. And that also makes it a lot easier to allow it to pass. In some of his other work, I know he's talked about emotions as like visitors, like it's a guest and you have to welcome and sit with them, but then you have to
Mhm.
show them the door when they're done.
I think that this chapter does one of my favorite things I like to talk about, which is that Buddhism has a lot of overlap with cognitive behavioral therapy.
Uh huh.
It's one of my favorite things. I probably have too much of an attachment to it, but I think it's interesting. Um, and so here, you just like you said, of like realizing you are not that emotion. It's the separate thing that you care for, and you take care, and you have to like cultivate self-discipline around. But it is not you in the same way that I don't know. It's interesting. It's amazing the polarity of those two thoughts, right? We try to get to a place where we're not separate from anything at the same time that we are not all of our emotions. Anyway, sorry, that's a tangent of
The
thought for me.
interbeing and the separateness of the emotion.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, maybe it's the imperfect analogy, right? It's not actually a baby, though. Where when we talk about interbeing, is with all of the things, but emotions are interesting because they're not really, they aren't real things, are they?
Mhm.
It's a condition
Mhm.
of the body in that moment. But
Yeah.
anyway, strange ways to think about it. But I wasn't expecting it to say this, and then when he did, I was like,
Yeah. I highlighted something in Insight up there. of our
Mhm.
anger was triggered when our friend spoke to us meanly and suddenly remember that he was not his best today because of this and this. As a teacher, I have to constantly keep thoughts like this in my mind. There's an
Mhm.
interesting article called Transference and Countertransference in the Student Teacher Relationship. And it's the same thought of not putting your own self onto your students or whoever you're
Mhm.
speaking to, and realizing that they're coming from their own space and you can't pre-write their narrative. You can't pre-write the script that you think they're going to follow. That's not how they put it, but that's how I interpreted it.
Mhm.
Um, and so to see it, and then I come to this, and it pretty much reemphasizes a similar thing, right? Like having the compassion to see beyond this moment where your friend has anchored you, and you remember that they're suffering and they're hurting, and that there's insight to be found in that, and you can't take it personally. Anyway, thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that too. I think some of it, all of these, all five of these steps are very important, and or five stages that he has here. But I guess sometimes I'm going, like, oh yes, of course, and didn't bother highlighting it because although it's really important, it's become kind of ingrained, right? To
Yeah.
constantly be asking why is this person acting this way in this moment?
Well, isn't that the
And
difficulty with any time we read a book? You have to. I'm not an expert at this, obviously. I'm terrible at it, but that beginner's mind as much as possible when we approach these things of being kind of freshly delighted and reinvigorated
mm-hmm.
by the content that we're consuming here.
Yeah,
So, as
absolutely.
much as I'm capable as an imperfect human being, I do try to approach our readings that way if I can. Hello,
So
Max.
welcome in.
Oh,
You made it. I did not highlight in this version of the PDF, so hopefully you can still follow along okay.
I should be fine.
But okay, so what else? What else? On to after calming, we get to resting. I also like I love a lot of his imagery that he
Mm-hmm.
uses. But I had highlighted this last bit of this paragraph that we can allow ourselves to sink naturally into the position of sitting, resting without effort. We have to learn the art of resting, allowing our body and mind to rest. That if we have wounds, we have to rest so they can heal themselves.
Mm.
Um, and he said two images. One, the way that a pebble sinks to the bottom of the water, and then the water just passes it by, and it doesn't affect it at all. It's just resting there. And then also that when we're resting, like any other being, like the animals rest and they don't worry about other things. They just stay where they are until they're better. And that this concept comes so naturally to everybody else or everything else but us,
Mm-hmm.
and that we always want to be doing, and we don't pay attention to these, or just allow ourselves to exist. And oh, where is it? This resting is a precondition for healing. So
Mm.
important to remember in this busy world that we have.
Yeah. I on this page I ended up highlighting practice in a way that does not tire you out, but gives your body, emotions,
Yes.
and consciousness a chance to rest. And I thought that
Mm-hmm.
that was really important because I think oftentimes it's really, at least for me, it's really easy to stress myself out with this practice, even though it's not meant to do that.
Uh-huh.
Like, I gotta be the very best Buddhist there ever was. Um, and so, and then you're like, nope, nope, gotta do that. What Thich Nhat Hanh says, my dharma is the practice of non-practice, and
Mm-hmm.
really trying to touch that, the heart of that, is so hard because I'm in such a performance-based life, right? I have to demonstrate I'm doing all these things. I gotta check all these boxes constantly. I gotta be able to be like, look at everything I did. I filled the Pokedex of Buddhism. Now I'm enlightened. I win. Um, sorry, I'm enjoying my new metaphor I just came up with. But no, but that's really it for me. Is I do need to rest in the practice and not just tire myself out with it.
Yeah, meditation does not have to be a hard labor. Don't struggle.
Right. Why
There's
am
no
I
need to
turning it
attain
into this?
anything.
Yeah. Why have I done this to myself?
This thought actually is probably something that I find somewhat alienating about certain schools of practice. I
Mm.
think
Mhm.
it doesn't always feel like that's what they're doing, and I really like this attitude, and I think it's very consistent with everything that he writes in general. But
I, I never get the feeling of inconsistency from his writings in my.
yeah,
It's like yes, this all vibes together. Very good.
but I also had highlighted that quote. It's such a good one to point out. Uh,
Yeah.
and something that we probably have to remind ourselves every time that we keep saying, "Oh no, but I have to get this done, but I have to get that done."
Mhm.
So, yeah. Well, moving on to chapter 7, we have touching our suffering, this turning the wheel of the Dharma, and all the 3 stages and how that applies to each of the 4 noble truths. This chapter was, it felt a lot more academic almost to read, like, in this step we do this, and this step we do this, and this is what it means, and this is how it works.
Yeah, it was a little different from his usual writing style.
It's useful still, but it it's okay. The first is this, and then when we sense something is wrong, but we're not able to say exactly what it is, and then every single one, it's kind of, eh, this is the first thing, this is what it is, and it was like, yeah, very universal experience that people have, and how you have to diagnose your suffering. He has a handy little chart of each of the noble truths and what each step actually looks like. And it seems so, at first, when I was looking at this chart, I'm going, well, this seems almost unnecessary to break it down in this way because it seems so simplistic, right?
Yeah.
But then he still managed to write an entire chapter and actually be saying something throughout the whole thing. So, I mean, that's something.
Um,
we have now all the steps.
I will say that before the charts part, he does say that our suffering is us, and we need to treat it with kindness and nonviolence, which is once
Mm-hmm.
again almost that polar, like those two thoughts that are kind of different. Um, and so I appreciate the reminder to treat even the parts of me that I don't want with kindness and nonviolence, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in the same way that we would desire to treat others.
I would say for me, that's been a really important part of my practice the last few months is being able to have these rising. My brain is like, hey, remember this embarrassing childhood memory you never want to
Oh
think about
no.
ever again, which is coming with some other stuff. Like, it's wild how like open my brain is getting with certain things that I hadn't thought about in so long, and I think it's because I'm doing all this other work. Anyway, regardless of that, I'm learning to be kinder to that younger version of me.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think for a long time I was very malevolent towards young Des. Because I was like, you were dumb. Why did you do it that way, you idiot?
But then you would never say that to like somebody else
I
at the
would,
same age that, you know.
yeah, I would never say that to one of my students or, and so learning to treat that version of me with kindness and nonviolence has been quite the learning process.
Yeah, that is a very important skill. If we do need to be reminded of, I think he does actually mentioned that quite a few times too.
Mhm.
Let me see. Let me find the next part. This last bit of this paragraph here, uh, the four kinds of nutriments that can lead to our happiness or our suffering. It's the edible food, sense impressions, intention, and consciousness. And
Mhm.
then kind of talking about, again, bringing back the mindfulness, how we consume in every sense of that word. So, not just the food that we are eating, but everything that we are putting into ourselves in one way or another, and being aware of what is toxic, what's poisoning us, and how it's affecting the way that we see ourselves and others, the mood that we're in, how we can really maximize
Mhm.
or optimize our time and our
Right.
development here by being mindful about all of these things that we are putting into our body, not just the way that we are consuming, not just being mindful of the actual process of, ingesting something or paying attention to the people that are around us or the activity that we're doing, but also the activities that we choose to engage in. And how, what is this note I wrote here? Sometimes to the way that we are uh, failing to nourish ourselves by taking from others, or this is really hard to go through two at the same time. I am not good at this. Okay. Like this strange anecdote about the parents eating their child to get through the desert, and that many people eat the flesh of their parents, their children, their grandchildren, do not know it, as a sort of catch all for.
I also highlighted that. um,
It's impactful.
it's impactful and it's true. I realized how true painfully while reading it, and I was like, that's what I'm doing when I cling to these things I'm mad about from my childhood,
Mhm.
right? Um, and when I cling to these stories and these things that have happened, and not only having a hard time being kind to young Des, but being kind to the people who raised me in my mind, and so yeah, I eat their flesh when I do that, and it's disgusting, and anyway.
And it's also counterproductive if our aim is, like through much of his writing, to
Mhm.
not only find happiness and suffering for ourselves, but also for the community, to be a part of the whole and help everybody to accomplish this. And we aren't doing that if we're behaving in these ways. And talking not only the nourishment of the body, but also the nourishment for our mind or our consciousness. And consciousness being the sort of manifestations of all of these things that we put, all of these things that make up our lives. And the bit about movies, like movies are food. All of these things that we watch are food. Like social media is food in a way. And what are we consuming on a day-to-day basis, and how do we act? And actually there was some, I generally try to stay away from that kind of stuff in general, because it's pretty easy to recognize that it is fairly toxic. But there was something that was, some issue that was going on, I can't remember what it was, in the last week, that I ended up going like, wait, what the heck are they talking about? And then reading something, and I could feel myself while reading through this and getting sort of entrenched in the controversy, that I was like, oh, this is so toxic. This is really bad. I'm not gonna, like, I got the idea of what's happening. It doesn't concern me, and I need to stop looking at this because it doesn't do anything.
On
And to
a
balance,
Yeah, sorry.
oh, last thought, to balance the curiosity and the inquiry and wanting to engage in criticism, not in the negative sense, but just in the analysis sense of see what's going on and determining what is true and what is fair, and
Mhm.
just to think about things that are happening and consider. but then also to like protect myself and therefore all of the other people who are in my life and important to me from this kind of toxicity and the irritation or anger or fear or anything that comes out of that depending on what the issue is.
Yeah. I have to say similarly, once again I've been shocked like, wow, this is so relevant to what's going on in my life right now. Uh maybe that's just how the book is, like it would feel relevant no matter what was going on. Um
Maybe.
so the at work, we've been having quite a bit of drama. There's some issues that happen. Teachers are mad, administration's mad, everybody's trying to point the finger, and it's
Uh-huh.
so tempting to like get sucked into the gossip, right? I want to hear what people are thinking, who's saying what,
Uh-huh.
but it is feeding a bad fire, and I have had to actively take myself out of rooms to avoid, because I'm just sitting in there listening. I'm
Mhm.
getting sucked in on the gossip because it's the hot thing they're talking about. I want to know like who's mad at who. Wait, what? Blah blah blah's thinking about leaving. Like,
Mhm.
and so it's just, and it's feeding myself junk food, like bad junk food. That's not helping me feel better when I have to deal with difficult students. It's not preparing myself, um, or energizing me to show them kindness and love. So,
Exactly. Yep. Or taking it home to your family too sometimes, yeah.
yeah, I can come home in a foul
Uh,
mood, and it's not Gregory's, my husband's fault. It's not my baby's fault, but I don't have the energy for them because I've spent all my emotional energy taking in junk food.
mhm. And I like this last point on that. He often brings up this image of a garden.
Hmm.
I think in some previous chapter he was talking about trees and caring for the sick tree, but also taking care of the healthy ones. And again, this watering the seeds. Are we watering the seeds of compassion and kindness and patience and all of that? Or are we watering negative seeds of craving, fear, anger, and violence? Have we been exposed to too many of these toxic things? Are we poisoning that garden? What are we actually cultivating in our minds and in our
Hmm.
bodies? And to be aware of how the things around us are affecting us. And I love that image actually. That's one of the most useful. But yeah, that point is good. We've got about how to protect ourselves from this poison. Oh, and then treating them down here. He's talking about invasions. We are exposed to invasions,
Yeah, that was
and
an
that mindfulness
interesting
protects
analogy
us.
of his, and he gets, yeah.
And just only what you are
Is this
certain
where
is
he gets into
safe.
the analogy of the cow without any skin?
Uh,
Yep,
was it?
Yep.
yep.
Yeah.
First he talks about some regular cows, and then we get to the disturbing cow.
Yeah.
I don't remember where he gets to it, but that
It's
imagery
here.
really stuck in my mind.
Uh-huh. It's effective for something, I guess.
Like, oh yes, thank you, Buddha. I wanted that in my mind forever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that idea of, oh gosh, yeah, I am the fleshy cow being consumed by bugs, and I can feel it in my skin now.
And the cow, the almost fleshless cow needs mindfulness armor apparently. So
Yeah, mindfulness, new skin in the form of mindfulness, I guess.
this is also a very challenging thing to do, though. I think in the world today. So and just only what you're certain is safe. Protect yourself from all of these invasive images and attitudes and
Mhm.
uh what else do we have? Oh yeah, and then this is something you were mentioning this earlier at the beginning of the chapter about doing things in our sleep, and I'd highlighted here about intention and our will of the direction we're going in life, that everything we do or say will be directed toward realizing that goal. Even in our sleep, our consciousness will continue to work on it, so that we need to choose carefully of what we're actually focusing on, because sometimes we're choosing to focus on the wrong thing. We think this thing will get us
Mhm.
to our actual desired end result, but we mistake that the step we've chosen, a method that we choose to get to, say it's happiness in a generalized sense, often something general, right, like that, right?
Mhm.
If we say, oh, I desire to reach this state of happiness, but the thing that I think is going to get me there is to get rich, and then becoming obsessed with
Yeah.
that thing will be all consuming to your life, and
Mhm.
then you may not actually. Everyone wants to be happy, and there's strong energy in us pushing us toward what we think will make us happy, but we suffer a lot because of that. Right here in this chapter,
Mhm.
we need the insight that position, revenge, wealth, fame, or possessions are more often than not obstacles to our happiness. Just a nice little quote there too. And then what else did we have? Can kind of move through.
Um, somewhere around there. I'm not sure where. I think it's a little higher up. He says when I he ends up summarizing it into when I think like this, speak like that, listen like this, or act like that, my suffering increases.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which is what I related to. And so he's as he says, until we begin to practice the second noble truth, we tend to blame others for our unhappiness.
Ah, yes.
And I thought that was a poignant statement.
I don't know where it is either, but yes, it was. This whole section I thought was really uh, very practical
Mhm.
and simple, but also it's so true. We can look at anybody and see this problem all around us, in ourselves and in others. But he did have a very useful. I think the useful advice, the Buddha advised us to look deeply into the nature of our volition to see whether it is pushing us in the direction of liberation, peace, and compassion, or in the direction of suffering and unhappiness. We need to be able to see the kinds of intention food that we are consuming.
Yeah. Um somewhere somewhere after all of that, he also says your practice does not mean using only your own mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. You also have the benefit from the mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom of friends on the path
Mm-hmm.
and your teacher. And that's one of the things I really love about book club. I for one, Lee, I think you have some amazing insights that I don't come up with, and then I like things that Ben says or Max has to say. You know, everyone who comes to the book club has something interesting that I didn't see, and that makes the learning both easier and more enjoyable. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Although on that point too, didn't he say something about even a child can see things that we may not because we're being blinded by I don't know if I highlighted that, but I remember at that moment going, you can literally just talk to a little kid, and that's also I've had that experience where sometimes I'm talking to a kid,
Mhm.
not usually about very heavy, philosophical debates or anything, but I could say something and they just make a comment and just see the world just a bit differently because they haven't been trained to look at it a certain way, or they haven't
Right.
been told to not ask questions. And sometimes having less information means that you can have more creativity about the answer and a
Mhm.
different perspective, and they're not entrenched in this certain viewpoint already from the broader culture that they grew up in, and they have really insightful, interesting things to say. And sometimes that is all it takes. It's just somebody different, even if they're five.
Yeah.
Gotta be a beginner's mind.
hmm
Yeah.
Or they haven't been brainwashed yet. They don't have to unlearn a lot of the garbage that we had grown up on. So sometimes there can be a sort of gentleness or purity in that. But what else did we have here? I'm trying to be conscientious of the time
You're fine.
because we went so late the other time. Oh yeah, this is the bit you were just talking about. I guess I wasn't far enough.
Oh, there we go. Yeah,
Okay, so
I skipped ahead too far.
oh, I did actually highlight it here. The things that even a child can see, but we ourselves cannot see because we're imprisoned by our notions. I love that.
It's true
Okay.
though. We're blinded by our experiences in many ways.
Also, the reminder if you keep your suffering to yourself, it might grow bigger every day. So that's the reason why it's very important to share. Oh, then on this page here, I had this was one of the most when I was reading it stood out to me as one of the most important distinctions that when we use the word suffering, we mean the kind of suffering that can show us the way out. Specifically, that it's almost to me it was that many people mistake the immediate catalyst of suffering,
Mm-hmm.
the person, like it could be a person, something that was said to them, a physical condition like a medical condition, or being cold or being too hot, or something bigger, a loss, an accident, an event that happened, or even just how the weather is that day. And they'll see this catalyst of suffering as the true cause of suffering and then try to remedy that. And in some cases, that may be worth doing. If you're cold, you can, maybe turn your heat on or wear warmer clothes or something. Or if you're too hot, you can get something cold to drink to cool your body down immediately. But some of these other things, especially when it comes to other people, blaming the catalyst of that suffering, what is setting you off, and mistaking that for the true suffering, that isn't what the Buddha is talking about. That's not what they mean in Buddhism. That the only kind of suffering that is actually suffering, when we're talking about fixing these things, is the suffering that can reveal to us how to actually overcome that, reshape ourselves and our mindset, and find happiness. And I think that this may be this distinction is essential for actual healing. That many people may read some of these things, and if they're applying it in that other way, that's not showing them the real way out. They could just be avoiding their issues, or distracting themselves, or running away from the people who are really important to them, and or running away from their loss, meaning they're not processing their grief, instead of turning into themselves and finding the true cause of their suffering that will help them to heal. That the perception, speech, and actions of ourselves that are causing that suffering, instead of choosing. Okay, what did I write? I think my brain was in a better place when I was reading this. They hastily act to try to remedy it. This is inconsistent with his teaching and ultimately ineffective. The truth is the perception, speech, and actions of ourselves that cause suffering, which can then be healed or controlled to remove suffering.
Mm.
So that may be too external facing concept, or looking in ourselves. But I highlighted and underlined this one as like, this is so important to remember. I think that maybe if you practice everything else well, you do get to this point more naturally. But
Mm-hmm.
when I see like other people, this is such a big problem, and it worries. It can be really worrying and difficult to bridge that gap, I think,
Yeah.
for somebody who isn't seeing it in that bigger picture kind of way. But I really
I
like
mean,
that he said it.
there's this tendency to try and externalize or like to blame
Mm-hmm.
other things, um, because if you're gonna go tell someone that's hurting, oh, it's really you can think about it differently, or if you look at it the right way, it won't hurt so much, and it might even help you become free of suffering. Like that's just such a hard pill to swallow in the middle of whatever, you know. Um, but like it's true though. You do need to just look at what is suffering. What am I suffering? Why
Hmm.
is it suffering? And get into the like meat of it. Um, but it's just not. It's unintuitive to try and be like, oh, this hurts. Let me dig in there.
Mhm.
Unless you have an ingrown toenail.
Well, yeah, okay, fine.
Well, some people don't want to do that either, Des.
Oh,
Not
Des is all
everybody's
about
like
it.
us.
oh, I just did it like a few days ago. I think I like maybe damaged some nerves doing it too.
Oh, good.
You went too deep, Des.
Yeah.
You have to practice the middle way, Des. What did we talk about last time?
Yeah, part of my toe's not the right color anymore.
Oh, good.
Des, no.
Maybe next time go to the doctor?
No, that's for rich people.
No. Just become really, really good at that. I don't think we're here to talk about
People are gonna
destroying
hire me to
our ingrown
remove their
toenail.
ingrown toenails for cheap. That's the point of book club.
The point of book club. Everybody can be informed about Des's excellent ingrown toenail
New
digging
business.
skills that destroy your nerves. It's great.
It won't hurt ever again, probably.
Moving on from toenail. uh, Jeez, how do you move on from that? Okay, separate, completely different thought. I like I liked this bit here that some people think to end suffering you have to stop everything, body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness, but that is not correct. In the and again, when we were talking about stopping, it wasn't. It doesn't mean to stop being. It's just to stop these particular things that are very go 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 that are preventing us from living in a mindful manner. Everything about mindfulness and not causing harm to others because of it. Oh no, we have 10 minutes and we haven't even gotten to the chapter 8.
Chapter 8.
Realizing well-being. This is important stuff.
I really love the way he opened this chapter, by the way, of when we have a toothache. We know that not having a toothache is happiness. And I'm like, that's legit.
I like the wording of the next sentence too, but later, when we don't have a toothache, we don't treasure our non-toothache.
I thought that was really realistic,
That's some
and
of the realest stuff I've ever heard, though.
it is
Like,
the realest of real things.
Are you all treasuring your non-toothache today?
I am now.
yeah, it's good to be reminded of all the things that aren't going wrong.
This is interesting to me because I've thought like this for a really long time because I have like a variety of uh discomforts or pain like pretty much on a daily basis to the point that when I did have a day where like everything felt great, I was like, wow, I feel great today, and I was actually very aware of that, but forgot that other people like don't. Other
Yeah.
people
I
don't think
rarely
like that.
have pain or really even discomfort, so that when it does occur, I'm like, oh, that's happening. And then I remember most other people have that just every day. And I'm just like, oh, wow, okay. That really gives a perspective on how different our lives are.
Mhm.
What magical superpowers do you have, and how do I get them?
I don't
I
know.
want
I
this.
wish I could share because, like, I'm having a pretty good time most of the time physically. It's just, I don't know.
And then your partner's not.
No, absolutely not.
I know, I've heard some stories. Um, my goodness. Wow. Let me just sit here and envy for a moment.
It's why I try and like do things so that no, no, don't get up. Let me do this because I'm not in pain from it, so it's fine.
um, Max is nourishing joy in others and themselves. Like
Mm-hmm.
Thich Nhat Hanh recommends we ask ourselves.
Yeah. At the page right there.
Yep.
What nourishes joy in me? What nourishes joy in others? Do I nourish joy in myself and others enough? Which actually, this isn't what he was talking about here, but it can be really, really useful to be aware of what kinds of questions we are asking ourselves.
Mhm.
Questions like these are very productive questions that frame our mind, and I think a lot of times we can get lost in asking ourselves questions that are kind of inherently toxic, coming from a frame of mind that isn't going to help anything much at all,
Yeah, Thich
no
Nhat
matter
Hanh
what you answer.
gets a little bit into that of like he asks how many people kill themselves because of rage or despair. And it gets really dark for a minute
Yeah.
to be like at that counterpoint of they can't see the vast happiness available, but like Max was saying, we can't just go stop suffering. Stop it. Why are you doing that?
Even if we're right, it doesn't matter. Like,
What you're doing is dumb. Stop, please.
Yeah. Hence,
God, if that
exclamation
worked,
point. We can put an end to our suffering just by realizing our suffering is not worth suffering for. Exclamation point.
Which is lovely. I'm on board. I'm there for it. But also not useful to say to a lot of people.
Yeah, this is the closest I can see to a frustration coming through in the things that he's written, but I feel it. I feel this so much. I
Um,
was just having a conversation like this the other day with somebody, but
I'm,
this
I'm
he names it as limited perspective too.
yeah, I'm getting there on a couple things. Not all the things, but there are a couple things I've definitely been able to like. Why was I doing that? That was dumb. And now those couple things don't cause me the suffering they did. If I could just get all the things there, I would be so happy all of the time. You guys have no idea. Once I unlock this, oh, I'm gonna be so obnoxious. Like so obnoxiously upbeat, you have no idea.
Well, not if you're doing it right, Des.
That's
Then you'll
true.
be just bringing joy to others.
Yeah, that's true. I'll be able to forgo the obnoxious part. I think that'll be part of the journey though. Once I start getting obnoxiously upbeat, you'll know I'm almost there.
Mm-hmm. So the step right before the final stage.
Yeah.
I thought the last part of that paragraph was also a very good reminder or prescription. Don't run away from things that are unpleasant in order to embrace things that are pleasant. Put your hands in the
Mm,
earth, face the difficulties, and grow new happiness.
yeah.
I like that as a yeah, just sort of a little quip we have. Also, this again back to the what she just mentioned there again, the garden that that we keep talking about. They
Mhm.
know how to transform garbage into flowers.
Yeah.
I love that. I love it.
That's why I throw all my rotting vegetables outside.
Mm-hmm. Like
It
a
does.
good organic gardener.
I'm not a gardener at all. I just have a small pile of garbage that composts itself slowly.
That's
Um,
okay.
Now,
You're helping.
I just generally really love this chapter. It's hard to really go through it in a way that's like, let's discuss it. Because unfortunately, I'm hitting that stride of like, oh, I love this. Oh, that's so good. Oh, yeah, I'm on board. You know?
Mm-hmm.
Which isn't necessarily a productive way to talk about somebody's writing. I will say a couple pages down, I made a weird little note to myself, and I don't know if I intended to talk about it or not, but at some point he calls Buddha a physician, which is something I've heard before, but also gives me like flashbacks to my times in Sunday school at a Baptist church, because the number of times I heard Christ referred to as a physician of the soul was innumerable. Um, and just I don't know why. I was like, huh, I wonder if that's a thing amongst all major schools of thought and religions. And if I could
Hmm.
find similar, like, do we all refer to our great teachers as physicians eventually? Is that just a natural anyway? But that doesn't have anything to do with book club necessarily. I just was thinking about it.
I have no answer for you, but I will now be keeping an eye out every time I hear people talking about their various faiths and lifestyles,
Good. You'll
and
let
then
me
I
know
will
in
report
three
back.
years after you have
Yeah.
gathered
Yeah.
enough intel for me.
Des, I finally have the answer. It is yes. uh, okay. What? I had a couple other things here I had highlighted. Um, oh, this bit here, that suffering and happiness are not two.
mm,
They're not two. When you reach the stage where joy is no longer fragile, it is true joy. This is maybe a difficult pill to swallow for a lot of people, but that I love that wording that just drives it home.
on a
Everything we've been talking about.
shallow level, and not really what this is talking about, but it touches on a similar feeling for me. Um, when you've got like a true strength inside you, even if one shitty person comes up tries to ruin your day, they can't,
Uh
you
huh.
know. And I think about little sufferings like that in the same way. Um, once you reach a certain stage, you just aren't going to be shaken by like, oh, I just broke my favorite vase. All right, it's gone now. Impermanence,
Mm-hmm.
yo. Um, and when and I've been there with a couple things. I've been there in the past and then fallen away from that ability, and I feel like I'm getting back to it a little bit. Where even though I know that for it's obvious I have favorite items that I own, the loss of them doesn't ruin my life the way it used to with how hard I would grasp and hold on to them as like a need for their continued existence, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense to me.
And so the eventually getting to that lack of fragility. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hashtag goals.
Hashtag yeah.
Hashtag yeah. What does it mean? What does it mean? Actually, honestly, the whole rest of this chapter, I think that we were just setting up for part two in this chapter. Um, he keeps talking about the eightfold path and how that can
Hmm.
lead us out of suffering. That by transforming our lifestyle, we can bring an end to suffering. That transformation is gradual. That we can't expect our difficulties to go away by themselves. We have to do certain things and not do other things. The moment we resolve to stop feeding our suffering, a path appears in front of us. The Eightfold Path. And just, yeah, I really feel like this whole chapter was just to make sure that we understand this. He said so many different ways. If we're afraid to touch our suffering, we'll not be able to realize the path of peace, joy, and liberation. Don't run away. Touch your suffering, embrace it, make peace
Hmm.
with it. Like in entreaty, that you really just
He spends a lot of time
understand
saying
this.
it's going to be hard. You're not going to have a great time to get
Yeah,
started. It's going to be a ride, guys.
but the path is here. It's there. Like we know what to do. We have a way. Face our suffering and transform it in order to bring about well-being.
I also highlighted that.
And if we finish this chapter, we should understand this now and have a pretty good motivation to read what's coming up in part 2 for the next time.
Yay.
The Eightfold Path.
I do
So,
love the way he sets up his writing quite a bit as far as giving us snippets, getting ready, giving us the tools going to need mentally to understand whatever he's going to explain next.
mhm.
Um, I personally appreciate that he doesn't assume you already know how to do everything. He comes in with what I consider a very skillful way of teaching, you know? I would feel very comfortable handing this book to a beginner, you know? Be
Yeah, I
like,
thought
you've never thought about this? Don't worry. I got a book for you. It's great.
I think that was one of the best intro. If we want to say the part one is an introduction,
Hmm.
I think that's probably one of the best I've ever read in any book. To be honest, it covered everything. Although he did repeat several things, it didn't feel like he was wasting time. It didn't feel redundant.
Yeah. Hmm.
That whole chapter, he said the same thing practically on every page, and yet it had slight variations, and it drove the point home.
Yeah,
And
it never felt redundant. Like, oh, why are we doing this again?
mhm.
Meaningful repetition.
It was meaningful
Good.
Yeah,
repetition. Oh,
a very effective teacher.
if
I
I
loved,
could
I
master
loved it.
that, my students would be so much better off.
Well,
Oh,
you have a good teacher here apparently. So
Yeah.
eat the book and become good.
If it worked like that,
well, some people believe it works that way, but
Can't tell me what I'm capable of doing, Max. You don't know yet.
you're right. Go ahead.
You right, do it.
I'll wait.
Perfect.
we did it.
We did
Yay.
We
it.
did
We
it.
did it.
Go team.